Hi, good morning. It's almost lunchtime, and we promise that we won't take too long. Echoing my state counterpart earlier today, we are here to help. I hope that is a message that you all get from all of the state partners that you have coming in today, as COGCC is also here. So we all do have this desire to make sure that we are helping not only our constituents, the public, but also industry, and making sure that all of industry is really kind of coming together and helping us and help everyone else in the state of Colorado. So today I'm here to provide a brief update on implementation of the LDAR requirements, the leak detection and repair requirements that were first adopted in 2014. While it has been 2 years since the adoption of those rules, it hasn't actually been implemented for that full time. There's quite a lot of work that goes into implementing a new rule. So we kind of celebrate that piece when it's adopted and in February of 2014, and everyone kind of thinks that it all goes away, but it doesn't. It actually comes to the industry, our industry partners, and to the division to actually say, okay, let's implement these rules, and how do we do that in a way that's reasonable, and how do we really get some information that's going to be useful to tell us how it's going. And that's where I'm going to kind of spend my time today. So the primary takeaway really is this is a leak detection and repair program. This is not a program designed to prevent leaks. This is a program designed to identify leaks and get them repaired, because that's how you minimize emissions. You can't prevent leaks. If you think about anything in your own home, anytime that you have a small connector or something coming together or a valve, eventually you're going to have a leak. If you think about it in your own water system, eventually something is going to fail and you're going to have a leak. So the idea behind this program is really about going out, doing those inspections, finding those leaks and getting them repaired in a timely manner so that we can reduce emissions of natural gas to the atmosphere. So that's the purpose, and that's what this program has really done. And I have to say, so far, I think it's been a very successful program. So today, what I want to talk about really are kind of a main overview of the rule requirements, a little bit about the outreach efforts that the division has made, implementation efforts. This is really going to what the division is doing and also what industry is doing. And I think that Vanessa will be able to speak a lot more specifically as to what industry is doing, but this is a little bit about that. Data review from the reporting, some of the reports that we've received so far. And then finally, areas that you can go for additional resources. And I just want to point out, because I never put on this slide what my email address is. If you ever want to email me, you have questions about any of this, I'm happy to answer your questions. You have to send it to stephanie.rucker@state.co.us. That's my email address. You have to spell Stephanie correctly, though. If you spell it with a PH, it does not come to me. It gets bounced back and goes off into no man's land. So make sure if you want to email me, it's pretty simple. All Colorado State employees have a pretty typical, so it's stephanie.rucker@state.co.us. So regulation number 7, kind of starting really high. The purpose of regulation number 7 is around regulating VOC and ozone precursors. So VOC, NOx, anything that's going to contribute to the production of ozone. And then it also is around control of hydrocarbons. And that's really a new thing. That was the first adoption of hydrocarbon requirements for air quality happened in this February 2014 rulemaking. So, and the hydrocarbons really was focused on oil and gas emissions. So you're looking at oil and gas, you're looking at Section 17. That's where we get into Section 17. These are the statewide requirements. So they apply across the entire state. It's not specific to the North Front Range. It applies out here on the Western Slope as well. And there are quite a number of requirements. So any of you who spent any time or participated in that rulemaking process, you'll know that we have quite a number. We go all the way up to H, I believe, in Section 17 now. So it is something that has grown over the years, but it's really intended to be a state-only statewide program, for the most part state-only, statewide program to try to control emissions from oil and gas sources. So specifically, this leak detection and repair program, again, it's around leak detection and getting things repaired in a timely manner. So the LDAR program is under Section 17F. If you ever want to go and take a look and just kind of peruse, you are welcome to do so. If you don't want to do that and you have some questions for me, I'm happy to answer those. This specifically targets well production facilities and natural gas compressor stations. So many of you may be familiar with LDAR requirements for natural gas processing plants. So those have been in place at a federal level for a very long time, since the early 80s. So there has been a long-standing leak detection and repair program that was targeted on those kind of largest of sources. And it doesn't just apply in terms of oil and gas, where you're focused on natural gas processing plants, but for other industries, chemical industries, so on, there has been a similar LDAR program for quite a long time. So it's around designing a program, and so what we did in Colorado is we took this federal program that we knew kind of historically had merit in terms of going out, finding leaks, getting them repaired, and we brought it to Colorado specifically to well production facilities and natural gas compressor stations. So very limited focus, trying to get those sources to be doing LDAR programs. And the benefit in Colorado is that we have a lot of industry who had actually already started similar types of programs prior to the implementation of this rule. So there is some data, and again, Vanessa is going to share a lot of this, but there is a lot of data around, what has been done across the entire country, because companies were not looking at this as something they had to be, something they were already doing to preserve their resource. So that was really the idea of building upon that idea and making sure that we were capturing that here in Colorado. So in Colorado, what you have to do, if you are one of those two types of facilities, you have to do some kind of, you have to do inspections on some kind of frequency. There is a frequency that's based on how big your facility is. So what the emissions profile looks like for that facility of VOC. So that's really what it's based on. There's emission factors and all of that kind of goes on behind the scenes there to determine that. And then the two types of inspections that are done are either AVO, which is audio-visual olfactory, which is you go out and you use your three senses, or at least those three senses, to try to find leaks. So if you smell something when you're on site, you may be able to go out and kind of identify or pinpoint an area where that could be coming from, and then you can come in with additional equipment to identify more specifically where that leak is coming from. And then the other component, and this is the new component, is around AIM, and it's called AIM is really trying to get to that instruments. What instruments can you use to go out and do your monitoring? And so the two instruments that are really commonly thought of, or the two instrument methods that are commonly thought of, are using an IR camera, and we had a presentation outside from FLIR, I believe, talking about this kind of thing, but there are other companies that have made IR cameras that can be used as well. So IR cameras that are going to recognize and find, be able to visually give you a picture that there are emissions coming out of a source when you visually with your naked eye wouldn't be able to see those. Or Method 21, which goes back to that federal requirement, which is a long-standing methodology where you actually take a little instrument and you go and measure it directly and measure leaks, and you're looking at each different one. So those are the two commonly used methodologies. Those are the two that are approved in Colorado. There is a mechanism for getting additional AIM approved in Colorado, and we have had some applicants for that. So that's a process that we're kind of going through. Another piece of the implementation is trying to understand what other technologies are out there, because we don't want to limit the scope and the creativity, frankly, that happens at an oil and gas level to try to find new types of better monitoring strategies and better monitoring methods. So, as I mentioned, the inspection frequency and type depends on the facility. Annual reports are due every year on May 31st for the previous calendar year. So at this point, we have some reports from 2014. a few, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that comparatively. And then we have coming up this May 31st, we will be getting the reports for the 2015 calendar year. So that's kind of where we are in terms of the data that we have available. All of the 2014 calendar year reports are published on our website, so if you're ever curious, you're welcome to go to our website, and I'm going to provide those later on in the presentation. And you can take a look, kind of look through that. We've also done a little bit of an analysis of those reports. Feel free to take a look at those as well, and I'm going to share a little bit of that information here. The leak threshold is defined as a 500 ppm threshold, so it's 500 parts per million of gas or a VOC or a hydrocarbon is the leak threshold. There is a slight caveat for 2000 ppm, so don't completely quote me on that, but it is largely, we're kind of considering it a 500 ppm threshold. So the division has done a ton, really, of outreach to operators, to local agencies, to trying to really get the message out there about what this rule is, how sources should be complying with it, what to be looking for, what we're doing with the information that we're gathering. All of that has been a huge part and a huge effort on the part of the division. So we've done workshops where we've gone out and we've actually spoken to people about it. We've also published quite a lot of information on our website. Again, you can take a look at that at your leisure. But there's a ton of information that's out there. And we probably still haven't answered all of the questions. There's still questions coming in that sometimes we have to go, let's figure that out. But we are happy to do that, and we're trying to get that done as we get those questions. Again, that AIM website. So a little bit about the implementation efforts. In Colorado, we have our division infrared inspection program. So in July of 2015, our temporary IR program became permanent, and this was a big deal for us, because it meant that we got to keep about 4 additional inspectors. We got to keep the IR cameras that we had purchased, which are not inexpensive, and we got to really implement that into our entire inspection program. And now we have a total of 11 inspectors who are out in the field on a regular basis. They take that camera out with them on a regular basis. They're looking for emissions coming from different oil and gas sources. They're doing a lot of work in terms of the records review when they're doing these inspections and they're asking for information from sources, and they're doing a ton of compliance assistance. So really trying to reach out to sources, identifying when we see things through the IR camera or through AVO, again, that kind of audio visual olfactory. If we see things, we're letting the operators know right away so that they can come out, take a look, see if they need to do any repairs. Again, trying to really get at the purpose of this rule being identifying leaks and getting them repaired. So this is really what we've been doing, what operators have been doing in compliance with the rule. And again, this isn't new to a lot of our operators in Colorado. A lot of these operators have been doing something like this for their programs, or created their own programs and been doing this in the past. So for operators, this isn't entirely new, but they're now doing it at these specific types of locations, the well production facilities and the natural gas compressor stations, and they're following the AIM, they're following the AVO, they're doing their inspections as prescribed in the rule. They're providing us reports. So really, so far, what we are seeing is that this has been successful, and I'll talk a little bit about that. You can see in these pictures, and this is one of the more compelling things that you kind of see, is on, let's see, on your left, there is a thief hatch. So this is the top of a tank. And the reason why we are promoting the use of IR cameras is because when you look at that and you take a picture of it with with nothing, just your naked eye, you don't see anything. There's nothing there to indicate that there are emissions actually coming out of the top of that tank. However, when you use the IR camera and you see this kind of black fuzziness, black cloud around it, those are emissions that are actually coming out of that. So that's why the IR camera is so beneficial and so useful to operators and to the division, because we can see things through the IR camera that we never would have been able to identify before. So related to reporting, as you may recall, in 2014, we had this rule was adopted in February of 2014, but the implementation, or really kind of things hit and started becoming effective in October of 2014. So we have an abbreviated year for 2014 in terms of required inspections. So in 2014, there were a little less than 5,000 inspections that were done. So this is huge. For an abbreviated year, we had about 5,000 inspections. That's amazing. And that's really what we're wanting to see. That's the purpose of this program. And this breaks it down to using AIM, so the monitoring methods, either the IR camera or the method 21, at natural gas compressor stations is kind of that top line. It's the smallest portion, which makes sense because natural gas compressor stations are our smallest in terms of just number of facilities. They're going to be a smaller number of facilities. AIM at I'm reading this as waste, at well production facilities, excuse me. So AIM doing those same kind of monitoring methods at well production facilities, identifying leaks, and then also the ADO at well production facilities. So that's kind of the breakdown. And related to that, we found, based on that reporting, there were 1,700 leaks found. And they were fixed, and that's the really exciting piece. So over 90% of the leaks that were identified in 2014 were fixed within that 5 to 15 day kind of time frame. So there were only approximately 80 that were identified and were put on a delay of repair, and the delay of repair really has to do with, some things can't be done right away. There can be other reasons you have to shut down the facility. So really, that shows us as the division that this program is working. It's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. It's identifying leaks and they're getting them repaired. So just to kind of conclude, here are some of these resources. I talked about you're going to be able to go to websites and actually see a little bit more information around what's going on. There's a ton of information that we put up on these websites. If you ever have questions about it, please let me know. But really today was around reviewing the rule requirements, trying to talk a little bit about what we've done to get them implemented, what outreach we've done, and just again, kind of going back to this program is about identifying leaks, finding them, repairing them, and that is being done according to the reports that we've seen. And we're really looking forward to the next round of reports that are due to us on May 31st, because that's going to give us an entire calendar year worth of information so we can really see how this program is working and what it's doing. And that's the end of my presentation, and I will turn it over to Vanessa, or do you want me to take questions? Okay, questions.
Microphone's coming to you.
There's one behind you.
The traditional federally regulated LDAR program, Triple K,
Right.
that covers the majority of the gas processing facilities, only require an action at 10,000 ppm.
You're right.
Why did the division choose 500?
Well, the division didn't choose that. The commission chose that. So there's a distinction there. This was agreed to actually with a combination of stakeholder support. So it really was something that came out of realizing that 10,000 ppm is pretty high when you're looking at leaks, and we have the capability with some of the newer technology that we have to identify leaks at a much lower threshold, and therefore we should be doing something about those. And there is a pretty significant amount of emissions if you do kind of that just quantitative calculation over the course of all of the components that are potentially out there. If you've got a difference in threshold between 500 and 10,000, that's a pretty significant chunk of the emissions that could be increased because of a higher threshold. So that was really the reason, was that it was considered to be cost effective, even going down to a much lower threshold.
A little more work on an operator's perspective to fix those leaks, though.
That is true. Other questions? Oh.
In regards to the inspection frequency per facility, how do you guys determine, I guess, that inspection frequency? Is it due to volume coming out of it, consumer complaints?
No, it's really related to emissions thresholds. So those companies that have to get air permits, as is common for well production facilities or natural gas compressor stations, they're going to have to do an analysis on what their potential for emissions are and their actual and controlled emissions from their facilities. So for natural gas compressor stations, it's really based on the total emissions from the facility, and that kind of gives us a judge for how big the facility is. So a 0 to 50 ton per year versus over 50 ton per year kind of breakdown for natural gas compressor stations. For well production facilities, it's a little bit different. We focus mostly on the storage tanks that are on site at those well production facilities and looking at the emission profile from those storage tanks. There are some well production facilities without storage tanks, and we're seeing that more and more as we're going to talk about. I think someone here maybe this weekend is going to talk about the centralized facilities, and we're going to go to the centralized facility later today. So those are kind of changing what well production facilities can look like, but the bulk of them are going to be based on the storage tank emission profiles.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Just to follow up on that, how do you determine which sites to go to and how frequently?
Who determine? How does who
how do
determine?
the inspectors? How do the inspectors decide which wells to go to and how frequently? Which geographic wells throughout an area?
Okay, so our inspection program is based on a couple of things. One, it's based on the emissions profile. So we do, it's all laid out really with an agreement that we have with EPA on how we're going to run our inspection program. So if we're looking at that for the division's purposes. So we break it down kind of major, synthetic, minor categories, and then we inspect a certain percentage of each of those. And then it kind of gets randomized in terms of how it's going to those inspections. We also have these they're called spot checks. They're kind of going out and doing these, again, randomized spot checks of facilities. So in terms of specifically how that's developed, I'm in the permitting side, so I'm a little less familiar with the inspection, how the inspection year actually gets charted. But that's the kind of rough answer I can give you. Okay. All right. Thank you.